I'm Dr. Jennifer Stelter. I'm the CEO and co-owner of the Dementia Connection Institute by NeuroEssence. NeuroEssence is a descriptor of how myself and my business partner, how we practice in dementia care, which is very holistic, non-pharmacologically based, okay? My background, I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a senior living and dementia care consultant. I'm obviously a Johns Hopkins author, as you guys have all seen, and the author of the book we're going to talk about today. My book won an IPPY award, which is for the independent publishing, and it's for health, nutrition, and medicine as well. So I'm very proud of that. What else can I tell you about myself? I'm married, got 2 kids, I like long walks on the beach. So I've been in senior living for over 13 years, in healthcare more than 20, and so my first half of my career was actually in mental health, and then my transition into long-term care, and specifically working in memory care for the last 13 years or so. My journey is much different than a lot of other people. They'll say, well, I got into memory care because I had a loved one who had Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia. And that is not my case. I actually really just fell in love with working with people with dementia and their families and the staff, and it was just really a labor of love. And in that journey, I had the opportunity to create the Dementia Connection model, which you'll learn about today. And luckily, when I did have a grandmother-in-law who developed Alzheimer's disease, unfortunately, I was an asset to the family and was able to help at that point. So my journey is quite opposite than most people. And so we're going to talk about the Dementia Connection model today, but before that, I just want to talk a little about my business partner. Her name is Jessica Ryan, and she's a biologist, educator, and aromatherapy expert. And so she partners with me on a lot of what we present and talk about in the community and things like that. But I've been doing this book tour now here for a few weeks and continue to want to take it nationwide. So I really appreciate you coming out and learning more about the Dementia Connection model and how you can apply that where you work. So without further ado, let's talk about the Dementia Connection model. So this actually was a model that it created itself over literally 10 years of me cultivating, creating, and researching. When I got into memory care, when I first entered into skilled nursing, actually was my first kind of long-term care experience, if you will. I actually was in behavioral health. And the company I was consulting for, they actually needed help in memory care, and that's when I said, I'll do it, right? As we all do, we're always like many hats, right? And I had had some experience in it, being a psychologist, but it wasn't my forte by any means. And so when I started to understand that there was a lot of challenges with staff not understanding the disease, families being really frustrated not being able to connect to their loved ones, I just said to myself, there's got to be a better way to explain this. And so through talking to a lot of nurses, CNAs, family members, they would tell me what their pain challenges were in understanding this. And so around this same time what was happening is I was actually having babies myself. And so I had gotten pregnant, I had my son, and as I would go home and I would take care of my infant son, and I was teaching him things over time, and obviously how to eat, eventually how to walk and talk and all those kinds of things. I would go to work and I'd be like, whoa, there's a mirror difference here between the people that I'm caring for at work and the people I'm caring for at home. The light bulb went on for me, and I said, this is the way I can explain it to people. So I started digging and understanding that there's research out there that shows how to explain a disease to individuals like ourselves who are caretaking. And then it further developed into, well, how do we connect with people with dementia, and with what? What tools can we use, okay? And 10 years later, the Dementia Connection model was born. And I had the opportunity then to partner with Johns Hopkins after proposing my research to them, and they said, we want to be able to support you in your work. And so I wrote the book with them, and then it was published in 2021, which is really exciting. And then the Institute came out in 2022. So that's kind of a little bit of my journey in terms of how things formulated. So let's talk about the Dementia Connection model. So the book itself, what's great is that in the first couple of chapters, you're going to learn more intensely about the model. And then each module or each chapter goes into an area of care and how to apply that model to that area of care, whether it's ADL care, whether it's communication, whether it's handling challenging response behaviors, things like that, okay? So the Dementia Connection model is a framework, okay? It comprises of 3 areas. The first area is the theory of retrogenesis, and that's kind of the explanation of what happens as the disease progresses. Has anybody here heard of that theory before? Got some nods, yeah? So it was actually developed by Dr. Barry Reisberg. I can't take credit for that. He did extensive research into what actually happens to the individual as they're progressing through the disease. And he actually identified for those who are moderate to late phase, and he actually looked not only at the skills of someone progressing, but actually the brain size he looked at. And he determined that in his research that individuals who are progressing have the brain size and skill ability of those who are 7 years old to 4 weeks old. And I say it in that way because everything progresses towards infancy, okay? So we actually took the physical weight and the structure of a 7-year-old and someone with moderate to late stage advanced Alzheimer's disease and said these look exactly the same, okay? And then he looked at the skill ability of a 7-year-old versus someone who's moderate to late stage and said their skills are exactly the same. And so his research was published, and he's kind of one of the founding fathers, if you will, of dementia care. So hopefully you get a chance to look at his research. It's really profound stuff. And so I really attached to that, and I said, this is really what caregivers and staff need to understand. It's not about saying that we're going to compare people with dementia to children. It's not saying that, or treating them like that by any means. It's our understanding of what that person is going through, right? It's us putting ourselves in that person's shoes. And so what we're doing is we're saying, okay, if things are reversing towards infancy, and I really want to just press upon you, every single skill, from walking to talking to handling life, coping, to emotional intelligence, everything goes in reverse, okay? So when they're progressing through the disease, right, we want to say, okay, well, what does that world look like for children and then infants? What does that look like? Because I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, right? People with dementia live in a different world than you and I do, right? And we say that so much, but what the heck does that mean, right? What it means is that people who are more advancing in dementia, they actually are experiencing their world using their senses to take in all information, okay? And they can still feel emotions because we often can see it on their face, we can see it through their behavioral responses, right? So they're reacting to that stimuli that's coming in from that sensory stimulation, right? And we think, okay, well, how does that compare to children and infants? Well, it compares because think about how infants actually learn how to become independent. They don't pick up a book at 2 years old and be like, okay, this is how I eat, this is how I walk. I mean, that would be great if it did, because then we could sit up as parents and be like, okay, you got it, right? That's not the case. So infants actually watch, they listen, they mimic, right? And they repeat over and over and over again. And that's how they learn how to become independent in the first 7 years of life, okay? So people with dementia are going to go back to that phase, and they're going to start watching you. They're going to start listening to you. They're going to look at the environment, okay? And that is their world now. So they can't necessarily factually learn things, like you guys are sitting here learning, you're consuming this information, you might be able to repeat some of it. They're not able to do that. But how they're learning is through their senses, okay? So let's talk about physiologically what happens when we take in stimuli and psychologically what happens, okay? Because the dementia connection model is the first cognitive behavioral theory in dementia care, okay? So physiologically, when any stimuli comes into our brains, and of course we're talking about people with dementia as well, but this is for all humans, okay? When it comes in, it actually triggers our limbic system in our brain. Our limbic system has two very important organs. One is our amygdala, which generates emotions. The other one is our hippocampus, which generates memories. So when any stimuli comes in, it's going to influence how we feel, and it's going to influence our memories around it, that event that occurred, who was there, all that kind of stuff, okay? So negative stimuli comes in, we might feel sad, depressed, angry, anxious, things like that. And then we have an event, we have a memory of that, who was there, what was going on, that kind of thing, right? Positive stimuli comes in, we might feel calm, happy, excited, that kind of thing, and then we have a memory of that event. Now, the difference between you and I and someone who has cognitive challenges is that you and I can decipher, okay, well, that stimuli that's coming in, I can walk away, I can turn it off, I can decide not to listen. But people with dementia, unfortunately, they don't have that ability because they don't know necessarily how to problem solve. Because the first sets of skills that they lose are their executive functioning skills, right here in our frontal lobe. And so unfortunately what happens is they can't decipher, okay, if it's too loud in here or if it's too bright, Oh, I'll just, turn it down, or I'll turn off the light. They can't problem solve this. They just sit there and they're uncomfortable. So negative stimuli comes in, they have negative emotions, usually anxiety, fear, anger, okay? And whoever's around them, they may not remember your name or what the actual event is, but they know, I don't like this feeling with you. And then what happens, this is the psychological side, it then influences how they act, okay? So anybody familiar with cognitive behavioral theory? Okay, so what that is, basically our thoughts impact our emotions impact our behaviors. So because the emotions are being impacted, it's going to influence their behaviors, okay? So that's often why we see things happen like, let's say they're participating in ADL care with a CNA, let's say, and let's say it's really cold in there and they can't tell you that they're cold. The CNA comes in with all the best intentions to, give them a nice shower. This person's cold, and it influences them in a negative way, and they feel really, really scared and anxious, and they're uncomfortable, and then what they do is they associate that with that CNA, and so over time it's the same CNA not helping it, which they think is not helping, right? And then they start to act out. So unfortunately that CNA gets yelled at, right? Or maybe gets a swat or something like that, because that's their behavior coming out, showing you that they are being influenced in negative ways. That's why that happens, okay? So that is really the theory of retrogenesis. There's a physiological reaction and a psychological reaction, okay? Now let's shift to the next pillar, which is habilitation, okay? Habilitation simply is the fact of we're gonna reinforce all the skills they still have over and over and over again, okay? Because what happened when I did my research, not only did the tools that I proposed in terms of putting on the table positive stimuli, okay? It had an immediate reaction within seconds. But I learned over time that over about 4 weeks, in testing this in assisted living facilities, is that our residents were able to learn what do each of these stimuli mean. I'll give you an example. So I specifically tested this in dining because I wanted to see if in a controlled environment, how would this model be successful. So what I did was we ended up doing some music, which I'll talk about. We did some aromatherapy. We did some bold color plateware and things like that. So can we really focus on kind of those 3 areas? And immediately the residents were eating more, they were happier, they were getting along with each other, right? There's a lot of good things right away. But then to my surprise, because I didn't know how this would be, we're in research right now, right? So 4 weeks later, we had the same consistent results, meaning that what we did at breakfast, we did the same every day, what we did at lunch, and so on. So about 4 weeks, all of a sudden, I remember there, because I was there helping implement with the staff, and I would see residents who before were always wheeled to the dining area on their own, right? They would actually, the staff had to wheel everybody there, then they had to serve, and it was so much work on the staff. And then all of a sudden, I saw residents just wheeling themselves to the dining area when they smelled the smell, when they had heard the music playing. So we had residents becoming independent right in front of our eyes, which was unbelievable. They were getting their own physical exercise by wheeling themselves or walking. Staff could actually attend to the residents that actually needed help. So they were more freed up to start the meal faster. And it was just so unbelievable. Family members were visiting, and I remember one family member just crying her eyes out, seeing how active her mom was. It was just so crazy. And so I knew that not only did the Dementia Connection model have a immediate effect, it had a long-term effect as well. Because residents can still learn, they just learn differently than you and I. They learn through sensory stimulation, okay? So that's the active habilitation, repeatedly doing the same thing over and over. And I think we all have heard consistency is important for dementia, and that is why, okay? So the third pillar is actually our tools, positive stimuli, right? So we're gonna use what's called sensory-based information. We're gonna use tools that they can connect to that will influence positive feelings, memories, and behaviors, okay? Because again, when they're taking in that information, what I found too is that the people who are giving them these positive experiences, they're more willing, the residents are more willing to go along with you. They're more willing to hang out with you. They're more willing to kind of comply, if you will, if you're having to complete something. And so they start to really associate these memories with you. So what happens is of course, the person with dementia is living in their new world, free with no judgments or controls or negativity. And then the caregiver, less work on them. They're feeling the effects of it because they feel like, yes, I did this, right? They feel confident and competent. Our staff ratings for satisfaction went up because they had more time to actually do what they want to do, which was spend time with the residents and not be working all the time, right? So it really was a win-win for everybody, okay? So that's really the Dementia Connection model in a nutshell. Any questions real fast that I can answer for you? No? Okay, I want to read an excerpt from my book that kind of summarizes what I just said. And there's a lot of examples throughout, and so the names have been removed in terms of anonymity, so these are made up names, but these are real residents that I worked with over the years, okay? So Betty was having a particular tough afternoon. As the hours wore on, she started to become agitated with the people around her. She was wandering with an angry look, cursing, unwilling to listen, and trying to push people away if they became physically close. Betty repeated to herself, and I'm sure we've all heard this before, I want to go home, I want to go home. Yeah, you've heard that before? Okay. I stepped in to help calm Betty and prevent any further escalation. Approaching Betty gently, okay? I presented myself in a calm manner with a smile on my face, right? That's visual stimulation. She sees I'm calm, cool, and collected, okay? I spoke to Betty in a calm, monotone voice, okay? So that's auditory stimulation, right? I played soothing sounds, which again, so music, auditory. Used a lavender essential oil blend, olfactory, right? And gave her a light touch so she knew she was safe, tactile stimulation, okay? Betty calmed down within minutes and even wanted to spend more time with me. Through the Dementia Connection model, I knew that Betty could still feel emotions, because I understood the theory of retrogenesis, right? Even positive ones, if influenced effectively, right? And over, that's habilitation. I knew she experienced her role differently than I did by taking information through her senses, that's sensory-based information, like young ones do, the theory of retrogenesis, right? So I used affirmative stimuli to provide auditory, olfactory, and tactile stimulation to influence a sense of calm. Appealing to Betty's senses helped to de-escalate the moment, which made me feel calm and confident for helping her. In the future, Betty will likely continue to feel a sense of peace when she sees me, because she has learned to attribute that positive feeling in her behavior with me. She's calm, I'm calm, right? So I talk a lot about the win-win in here, that it not only serves the people that you care for every day, but also it serves you too, okay? All right, so I'm gonna go through the 5 senses and talk about some things that you can do. Now keep in mind, everybody's different. So when we talk about person-centered care, it really is about the individual, okay? So I'm gonna talk about a few things, and of course you probably have other things that you have done too that are successful when it comes to this kind of stuff, because sensory stimulation is nothing new, right? We know that we should do it, but oftentimes we just don't know why, right? And so I hope that the Dementia Connection model really explains to you why you need to do this, okay? So let's start with visual stimulation, okay? So a couple of things with visual stimulation. So let's talk about pictures and reminiscing, right? We know reminiscing is so successful, right? So think about pictures that they would enjoy looking at, right? Whether that's family photos or vacations that they went on, or maybe it's relaxing scenes. I love the scene of any beach. So if you ever have to take care of me, please, I want beach scenes in my bedroom and things like that, okay? So visual stimulation is really good. Now, just think about too, this can also go sour. So if they don't get along with it, certain family members, don't have pictures of those people there because that can be a problem, okay? We're trying to influence positive feelings, right? Okay, other things. Colors are a big influence in this industry, okay? So I have a whole chapter on colors in here, or part of a chapter on colors in the book, okay? But I want to bring your attention to dining, okay? So this, the plateware has actually been studied. There was a study done by Boston University that showed by switching to bold color plateware, you can actually increase consumption by 24%, okay? Now when I did dining and I added a couple other stimuli in there, I increased that to 45%, so I was able to double that, okay? So specifically red was tested that it actually increases appetite, okay? And yellow actually sustains attention, okay? And who's a multi-billion-dollar business right now? McDonald's, right? Yeah, right? Somebody did their homework. So I would encourage that if you're a company or if you care for people at home and you're using things like white plates or cream or even like darker colors like brown or black, let's get rid of those because this actually can make a huge difference. I have so many like testimonials and stories of folks who would be able to look at this and they would use the bold color plate where it had so much success, okay? Now, I took it a step further from the study from Boston University and I said, because contrasting colors are really important, especially if the person has macular degeneration, which a lot of folks with dementia do unfortunately develop, okay? So what we did was actually, we plated based on the color of the food, okay? So we didn't so much do it if they needed to increase their appetite or if they needed to sustain attention. What we did was, if we had things like, like spaghetti with red sauce, we put it on a yellow plate. I know it's not a plate, but a yellow plate, because the food would pop, right? They could see it better. If we did chicken or rice or something like that, or potatoes, we did it on a red plate. And we actually were able to increase the consumption even more, okay? So we kind of did that, a little bit of research into that, and it worked really well, okay? Other stimuli too. So we're all familiar with puree food, right? I think we all know that when it looks like on a plate, it's not very appetizing, right? But what does liquid in a bowl look like? Soup, right? So we had residents who did not care for their purees on a plate. So we switched it to bowls, and we had every resident eat their puree, okay? Because it's all about visual stimulation, right? So if it looks like soup, it's more appealing. And for the generation that we are working with, soup was a big part of their life. They ate soup with most meals, lunches and dinners. So for them, it was much more appetizing. It looked appetizing. We didn't change the recipe. We didn't change the consistency. We simply just put it in a bowl and they ate it. I remember one resident, she was unfortunately losing weight, and so we were concerned. So we started to put her puree in bowls, literally was licking the bowl at the end of the meal. And her family member was there, and she started to break down and cry. And so it was just so, I'm going to cry right now. It was so just awesome to see that experience with her. So definitely recommend that if you aren't doing that already, okay? Other types of visual stimulation, magazines, books, things like that, okay? Let me get back to colors real fast. Lime green is actually the most powerful color that you can use. I know it's not the most attractive color, but it is the longest color that we as humans can see. And there were studies actually done that actually increased navigation for those with dementia by 33%, okay? And then I actually, when I consulted for a long-term care company, we actually switched the nurses and CNA uniforms from traditional white to lime green. Again, not the most attractive color, but we actually were able to reduce falls and reduce sundowning behaviors because of it, okay? So just something to consider. I'm not saying you have to go change your uniforms or anything like that. What I'm saying is lime green is a really powerful color, whether it be decor, whether it be if you choose, to change what you wear, a blouse or something like that. It's a really powerful color, okay? Colors that you want to kind of stay away from. White seems very blurry to people, okay? And then black above the knees is just kind of not really interesting, right? So just kind of avoid like gadgets and things that you're using, right? Real dark colors are not really attractive to them. They want bold colors, right? And think about that, if you have small children, you go to any kind of, I guess Toys R Us, and date myself, I think it's closed now, but you go to like a Bed Bath & Beyond or a Babies R Us, whatever it might be, right? Everything's bold because we're trying to exercise the eyes of people who, for babies. And we want to do the same thing for people living with dementia. We want to exercise their eyes with that bold color, so they're attracted to that, okay? All right, let's switch gears to auditory stimulation, okay? You probably have heard music's very powerful, right? So lots of research in there. Music and memory is kind of the founding fathers of why it's so powerful, playing music of their era. However, there was a study done out of Harvard University looking at what type of music should you play based on the day, okay? So in the morning, they actually recommend to play upbeat music with words, okay? Music that of their era that they enjoy. And the reason being is because, as we all kind of do, when we hear a really good song, we hum it, we sing it out loud, we sing it to ourselves when we sing it in the shower. So it gets their verbal skills going for the day, okay? Midday, upbeat music, no words, okay? And that allows them to be able to socialize without distraction of the words, okay? And then towards, I would say, right before sundown, about 30 minutes prior, we're gonna pull out all the steps and I'll get to what those are. But for music, you wanna play non-biharmonic music, which is one tone. So it's like a violin, a guitar, saxophone playing. So think classical with one instrument, okay? And you want to play that all throughout the evening, and you can even play overnight if you'd like, if they have trouble sleeping, okay? But that's been shown to be really successful to calm the physiology of the body, okay? Which we want during the late afternoon, early evening hours, correct? Yes, yeah. But let's think about other sounds that maybe they enjoy. Maybe they like listening to birds chirping, kids laughing, right? Might be a family member's voice that calms them. Again, but think about the opposite too, right? They may not get along with every family member, so we have to be good with that. But think of our tone of voice too. How are we approaching them, right? We want to make sure we always feel and seem like we are calm, cool, and collected. Okay? All right. What else can I play up here? Let's talk about gustatory stimulation. Okay? So gustatory stimulation is what we eat. Okay? Now, unfortunately, as the disease progresses, they do have their appetite decrease for most of them. Not everybody, but a lot of them do. So we, of course, want to serve foods that they enjoy. But I do know that, of course, as the disease progresses, they're going to start liking foods that they like when they were younger, like candy and cookies and things like that. So all in moderation, okay? Now, the Mediterranean diet has been shown to really help our brain stay healthy. So I do recommend that we're incorporating some of that into the menus to make sure that they're getting those leafy greens, those foods high in omega-3 fatty acids, things like that. We want to make sure we're nourishing their brain as much as possible. And it not only has an impact on the brain, but also the gut. Because 95% of our serotonin, which is our happy chemical, it resides here, not here, okay? So what happens is when we eat junk and that kind of stuff, it actually impacts our mood. So let's do our residents a favor, right? And let's make sure we're feeding them healthy food so that way they do feel healthier, they do feel happier, right? Because this is all about influencing positive emotions, okay? You can also do fun things with them, like if they like to bake and cook, they can be a part of that process as much as they can to be part of that gustatory stimulation. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times the disease progresses, they also don't think to drink, so they become dehydrated very often. That unfortunately can lead to urinary tract infections, kidney disease, right? Dehydration, and then they have all kinds of things like psychosis and all that fun stuff, right? So to avoid that, if they are having trouble, of course, water stations are great. Encouraging them. We as staff have to remind them because they will not stop and do it themselves. Now, these are some nifty things that came out of Canada. They're called Pattinson's jelly drops. Sounds like some of you guys have seen these before. They're great because you just pop them in the mouth, they dissolve, they're sugar-free, tastes like Kool-Aid, right? So it helps to hydrate them over time, okay? Now you need a few per day in order to get their full water in, so, but it really is a nice alternative, or it can be in conjunction with regular water as well. So these are a really great alternative, okay? Let's talk about tactile stimulation, okay? Now tactile stimulation and olfactory stimulation are the most powerful stimuli you can use, okay? So let's start with tactile. Why is that powerful? Because what happens is when we're doing anything with our hands, so this could be things like gardening, baking, cooking, crafting, coloring, crocheting, all those kinds of things, right? When we're doing things with our hands, there's a process that starts to occur in our brain called neuroplasticity. And that's when our brain forms new neural connections, okay? And so that's great because our brain can always be kind of turning over, if you will, right? It's not going to cure dementia by any means or anything like that, but it really helps to kind of allow the brain to shift and pivot and use parts of the brain that it needs to in order to keep going, okay? That's kind of a clinical way to talk about what neuroplasticity is. Now, there's a side benefit to neuroplasticity, okay? Two things happen. I always talk about side benefits to our tools because they're non-pharmacologically based, okay? So what happens is there's a grounding effect that occurs. So they actually become less anxious and fearful, and they become more attentive and focused. Isn't that the best recipe you can give someone with dementia, right? Mm-hmm. They're calm and they're paying attention. That's great, okay? So anything tactile. This could be also using things like, I'm big on doll therapy. I'm big on animatronic pets, right? I'm big on weighted blankets and fidget kinds of things, you know? Have that around for them, especially right before sundowning, about 30 minutes again before, set the tone, because that's gonna calm them down. They're gonna be more focused on what's going on around them, not get as scared, okay? So that's gonna be really good during your afternoon hours, okay? So So that's why tactile stimulation is so powerful, okay? Let's see what we have left. Olfactory, okay? So olfactory stimulation is probably the most powerful. The reason being is because when anything comes in that we smell, it goes right to the limbic system right away. Where all the other stimuli, it goes somewhere else in the brain and then it goes to the limbic system, okay? So it's not as if these things take a long time, but I'm just saying that olfactory goes right directly to the limbic system because when we breathe in something, the olfactory bulb is right at the base of the limbic system, so it goes right in, okay? So it actually works within 22 seconds when we breathe anything in, okay? Olfactory stimulation can be brought on by many different things, especially if they can still smell. So, you know, if they love the smell of fresh baked cookies, if they like the smell of cinnamon sticks, or if they like, different kinds of coffee being brewed, that kind of stuff, right? It is really important that they can still smell, that we exercise their sense of smell as much as possible. Because what we found in research is that once they lose that sense of smell, within 2 years they're usually diagnosed with advancing dementia. Okay? So we want to make sure we're exercising that as much as possible. So that could be, putting pungent items in a jar, an activity, they're smelling them, identifying what those are. Again, they could be doing different things where they're labeling what things might smell. Now, if they cannot smell anymore, okay, essential oils, or aromatherapy as we know it, right, is going to be your best bet for olfactory stimulation. Because it doesn't matter if they can identify the smell. Essential oils have a therapeutic benefit that what happens when you smell them in, they go right to that limbic system like we talked about because they can cross the blood-brain barrier, okay? So they're gonna impact that amygdala, which is those emotions. They're gonna impact that hippocampus, which is your memories. And then it's gonna, of course, influence their behaviors, right? So I'm gonna give you a little bit of an exercise here of your olfactory system. So I'm gonna pass these out. Just smelling here on the bottom, this is where some of the oils are. So I'm gonna pass that out for you. You can keep these are for you. Okay.
Do they have a set on already?
They do. So what you're smelling is spearmint and a citrus oil. And I'll get to why those particularly ones, okay? Spearmint and citrus. So take some really good deep smells in, some deep breaths right from your belly, okay? Everyone's got one? Okay, so take some deep breaths.
Smells like spearmint.
Yeah, spearmint, we got some citrus in there, okay? I see some smiles on our faces already. I did that on purpose so you think I do a good job. So peppermint and citrus is what I recommend in the morning. So we talk about this habilitation, right? You want to be very kind of meticulous with how you are presenting the essential oils because they have a purpose. It's not about just, I want to make it smell good, right? Peppermint actually is very invigorating, okay? It opens up the nasal passages, especially with our stuffy noses. It actually brings more oxygen to our brain, which allows us to focus more, right? It gets us going in the morning. So that's why peppermint or any of the mints really good in the morning for people living with dementia. I would highly recommend diffusing this in their bedroom or in the community area, even in like their bathroom or shower area where you might do some ADL care to get them going and ready to go, right? Citrus actually has been shown to improve mood, so it actually plays on the serotonin in our body, and it increases appetite. So happy, hungry patients at your dining table, yes, right? You want that. So it's really important that citrus you want to actually diffuse throughout the whole day. So every single meal, citrus, okay? It could be any citrus, it could be lemon, clementine, whatever you guys want. Especially if they can't smell anymore, whatever the staff prefers is fine, right? And so for the residents that can smell, they often do like these smells, okay? Because these are casual smells, okay? Not too pungent and things like that. I'll kind of talk a little about some of the other oils, but I want to talk a little about how do you actually use these oils. So I was talking about the word diffusing, okay? So you can use a diffuser if you'd like, okay? Diffusers come in all shapes and sizes and colors. You can get really fancy ones or real basic ones like this. Just pay attention to the square footage because if you're trying to diffuse in a dining area or a community room, you want to make sure it gets the whole room, right? So you don't have to set up like 5 or 6 of them because that's a lot of work on the staff, okay? So these, if you're going to use a diffuser, highly recommend that you use distilled or filtered water. Do not use tap water. Why is that? Because remember, essential oils cross the blood-brain barrier. So what happens is that if the tap water, which we know sometimes has allowable metals and things in there, it's going to go right to your brain. Not good, okay? So use your filtered water as much as possible, okay? It's easy, you fill it to the line, you put 4 or 5 drops in there, boom, it's on, and it can really run for like 10, 12 hours, so it's really easy, okay? Now people may ask, well, what if people drink it? What if people with dementia drink it? It's okay, because a lot of the oils that I'm recommending here today are ingestible. So their belly might feel a little bit, but it's not gonna harm them by any means, and there's no contraindications to medications. There are certain oils you do not want to use, and we would never recommend them here at the Institute as well, okay? Clove is one of them. Avoid clove at all cost, because what happens with clove, it's a natural blood thinner. We know a lot of our residents are on Coumadin, so we don't wanna increase that, right? Okay? So that'd be one I would totally avoid, okay? Another one is, I think it's cinnamon. Cinnamon you don't wanna use as well, because that will actually heighten some psychotropic medications. Okay, so we don't wanna give them the adverse effect, okay? So keep that in mind. Okay, so another way you can use them. I don't have these on me, but we created the Institute, they're called personal diffuser dots. They're little circles, they're felt on one side, sticky on the other. You put about 3 or 4 drops on them. You stick it on the lapel of the person, whether it be under here, or whatever it might be. They got a personal diffuser all day, right? So you can individualize it if they have a specific need, okay? So let's say you have a person who really seems to be just agitated all day, and just like get them with lavender all day, right? It lasts 6 to 8 hours, and when you're done, you just throw it away. You could add another one for the nighttime. They sleep with it too on their nightgown or whatever it might be, okay? So personal diffuser dots are great. You can check them out. You have our website as well, okay? So those are some ways. You can do it topically too. You want to make sure that they're breathing them in. So if you do it topically, do it around the neck area, okay? So ladies, kind of like we use perfume, okay? Sometimes men after, cologne, whatever it might be. But you want to make sure that you're always diluting, okay? Because pure essential oils are very, can be pungent to the skin, okay? And we know that people that we care for, their skin is very thin, okay? So we don't want to cause any reactions. So you can mix it with any kind of carrier oil. That can be like vitamin E oil, it could be coconut, fractionated coconut oil, jojoba oil, okay? So what you do is you take 10 drops of your base oil, 1 drop of your essential oil. That's a high dilution. That is good for elderly and children. Now, you and I, it's 50-50 if we use it topically, okay? But for our vintage and for our young, we want to do a 10-to-1 ratio, really important. I always recommend do a test patch first, like on the wrist area, let it sit for 24 hours and see if they have any reactions. If they don't, then you're good to go around the neck area and use it topically, okay? So you want to make sure that you're doing that, okay? All right, let's talk about some other oils. So we did peppermint, we did a citrus. Now let's talk about lavender, okay? If you're thinking to yourself, well, I want to institute this at my facility or whatever it might be, go with lavender first. It's gonna be your go-to oil, okay? So keep it simple. Lavender is really great because it's great for calming of anything, okay? So again, 30 minutes prior to sundown, I'd recommend diffusing this or putting a personal diffuser down on the person or to your community members because it will really help to calm them when sundowning is approaching, okay? So if you're doing that and the non-barharmic music and the tactile stimulation, when I did that with the place that I was working and consulting with, we actually mitigated sundowning behaviors, okay? I'm not saying that it's 100% bulletproof, but what I'm saying is we were able to really manage that. And so sometimes you'd walk on the memory care neighborhood and you'd be like, what's going on? Everyone's calm, cool, and collected. It's 5 o'clock, oh my gosh, right? It was really an awesome experience to see. So lavender's great. Now, what essential oils do is they actually reset the body back to its natural balance. So those who need to be calmed, it will calm them. For some of our residents who are more depressed and sad, it will actually uplift them, okay? So it's been used as kind of a mini, let's say, antidepressant, if you will, too, in clinical trials. So it really is a great oil to use, and you can use it anytime throughout the day, depending on what's going on with the person, okay? Now, we don't specifically want to use it in the morning unless the person has high agitation in the morning, okay? But if they're not someone who is like that, we don't want to do it because it's going to make them feel very kind of tired, and we don't want that in the morning time, right? So again, we want to be strategic about how we're doing it. Now, so that's olfactory stimulation. Now in the book, I also, after each chapter, you have a chart that you can actually track. So I always recommend, with any of the interventions we talked about, track and trend what's working. Okay, so you'll learn about, let's say, eating challenges, and I'll say, okay, here are 5, 6 things you can do for eating challenges. You try them with your community, or with your residents, or with your loved ones. You write down what worked and what didn't work, and then from there, at the end of the book, you've got a whole plethora of tools that you can use, okay? So it's important that we track and trend what works. You may have in your community some kind of thing like a behavior tracking system, maybe that's electronic, maybe it's on paper. It's important that we're tracking which tools actually work, okay? Not that they had this behavior and you calmed it down, okay? And a lot of times when we talk about CMS, right, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they actually say you need to use non-pharmacological interventions first before pharmacy, and you have to document it, okay? So when you use that PRN, they're gonna say, well, what'd you do first? Where's the documentation on that, right? So you want to tell them, I used all this non-pharmacy, and if it didn't work, and you had to give the Ativan, fine, it is what it is, right? But let's try the pharmacy first, or the non-pharmacy first. And that's one of the reasons I opened up the Institute, because having worked before the Institute was open in long-term care for so long, our residents are way over-medicated, okay? And all it does is it causes more problems, and it actually advances their dementia. We are not in the business for that, right? We want them to have the best quality of life, for them to actually live in their world freely, right? And part of that is saying, okay, we're not going to kind of make their physiology go down, okay? We want to make sure that they're robust and sociable and having a good time, okay? And these tools will influence that for them, okay? Let me see if I missed anything. I don't think I did. Went through all 5 senses, we're good. The last thing I want to say is, although we went through the 5 senses, okay, we cannot forget about, again, going back to executive functioning skills. Our cognitive work is very important. Even though they have dementia, we have to be able to still exercise their brain. Now, I think we all know we may have to kind of alter some of the activities, whether it be they're doing Sudoku, they're doing trivia, you know, they're doing some kind of meditation. We have to alter it based on the stage that they're in, right? Different kinds of tools, maybe different slower pace, whatever it might be, shorter activities, right? But it's really important we still stimulate them cognitively. Okay? So again, whether that be trivia or it be Sudoku, word searches, crossword puzzles, all those kinds of things, puzzles, we still want to work with them as best as we can to keep that brain going, okay? So cognitive stimulation, I always say, is like our 6th sense, our 3rd eye, right? That's what I say, because our executive functioning skills are right here, okay? All right, so that's really the kind of summary of the Dementia Connection model, some tools that you can use, and then like I'm saying, you're probably thinking about, I can do this and I can do that. That's awesome, and that's really what this is about, is to get you going to think about what other tools can I bring back to where I work or who I care for, and be able to provide the best quality of life. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time for coming here today, and I'll be available after for questions and book signing.